There are 19 show me tell me questions. You'll be asked one show me question, one tell me question. Let's have a look at the under bonnet questions first. You'll need to open the bonnet, so come round to the passenger side, pull on this lever, you'll hear the bonnet click, and that's the bonnet open. You then need to walk round to the front of the car, pull on this little lever, lift the bonnet, release the lever. Once you've lifted the bonnet up, put the clip in the slot and make sure the bonnet is secure. One of the 4 under bonnet checks will be to check the brake fluid level. Identify where the brake fluid goes and tell the driving examiner that you would check to make sure the level was between minimum and maximum. You might be asked how you would check the engine coolant. Identify where it is. Explain that you would check the levels are between minimum and maximum. Also explain that you check when the car is on level ground. Be cautious when opening the lid with the engine hot because you do run the risk of scalding yourself. If you're asked how to check the engine oil, identify where the dipstick goes. Explain that you take the dipstick out, wipe it with a cloth, reinsert it back into the tube and take it out to see that the levels were between minimum and maximum. You might be asked how you would check the windscreen washer fluid. Identify where it goes. You can look inside the tube and you can see the level of the liquid. If you can't see that, then you can lift the lid, look inside and see how much there is in there. When it comes to filling it up, you're just going to use water and screen cleaner. After you finish the under bonnet checks, take the weight of the bonnet, take the lever out and put it back in its clip, lower the bonnet down, push on the bonnet, you'll hear it click, and that's the bonnet locked. You might be asked to check how your power steering works. Switch the engine on, make sure you've checked handbrake and neutral first. Just apply a light pressure to the steering wheel. If the steering wheel moves freely, then the power steering is working. If it feels stiff at this point, then the power steering has a fault. You might be asked to tell how you would check that the brakes are working before starting a journey. Just explain that the brakes shouldn't feel spongy, the brake pedal shouldn't go all the way down to the floor, and if the car pulls to the left or the right when braking, there is a fault. You might be asked to show how you would check your brake lights are working. Switch your ignition on, put some pressure on your foot brake, and ask the driving examiner to go to the back of the vehicle and check that the brake lights are working properly. You might be asked to tell your driving examiner where you would find the information for the recommended tyre pressures for this car and how tyre pressure should be checked. On this particular car, there is a sticker on the passenger side with all the information that you need to say exactly how much air you should put in each of the tyres. If you can't find that information, look in the driver's handbook. Now, to check the tyre pressures, you'll need to use a tyre pressure gauge. You just put the round end over the valve of the tyre, push it on, and it moves this needle in and out just to tell you how much pressure is inside the tyre. You might be asked to tell how you would check the tyres to ensure that they have sufficient tread depth and their general condition is safe to use on the road. Check the outside wall of the tyre to make sure there's no cuts and bulges. There should be at least 1.6 millimeters of tread across 2/3 of the width of the tyre, and the outside of the tyre should have at least a visible tread pattern. Tell me how you would make sure your head restraint is correctly adjusted so it provides the best protection in the event of a crash. Now, the head restraint should be adjusted so the rigid part, that's this part of the head restraint, is at least as high as the eye or top of the ears and as close to the back of the head as is comfortable. You might be asked to tell the driving examiner how you would check that your lights were working. You would do that by switching the ignition on in some cars, switching your light switch on, exiting the car and walking around the car and making sure that the lights were in working order. Because it's a tell me question, you don't actually have to get out of the car. You might be asked to tell how you would know if there was a problem with the anti-lock braking system. If I just switch the ignition on and show you, the anti-lock braking system warning light is down there. It says ABS on it. So if you were driving along and that ABS light came on, it would indicate a fault with the ABS system. Show me how you would check the parking brake. That's the handbrake for excessive wear. Make sure you keep safe control of the vehicle. So that means just apply some pressure to the foot brake. You can demonstrate this by
applying the parking brake, and we can feel that's biting, if you like, that's holding the car in that position. But if this handbrake came all of the way up, that might indicate that the cable is snapped, or if when you raise the handbrake up and release the button, the handbrake just dropped down, again that might indicate that the mechanism that holds the handbrake in this position is broken. You might be asked to show how you would set the demister controls to clear all the windows effectively. This should include both front and rear screens. This button here is for a front screen demister, that button's for a rear screen demister, so you would press both of those. This switch here needs to be in that position for air to come out of the front vent. This is the heater control, so cold in the summer, hot in the winter, and this is the fan. You would adjust that depending on how much air you want blasted into the car. You might be asked to show how you would check that the horn was working properly. Now you will be off the road, that is, you will be parked in a car park, so it's perfectly okay to sound the horn. Just press it and that demonstrates that you can show how it's working. You might be asked to show how you'd switch on the rear fog lights and explain when you would use them. First of all, we'll need to make sure we switch the lights on. Pull this one click out, that's the front fog light on. Pull it out again, that's the rear fog light on. Now don't forget that these rear fog lights are high intensity lights, so we only need to use them in fog or when we're in adverse weather conditions. That could be heavy rain, something like that. Push it back in, switch the lights off. You might be asked to show how you would switch your headlight from dip to main beam and explain how you would know that the main beam is on whilst inside the car. Quite simple, just switch the ignition on, put your lights on. This is the switch for the main beam. Pull it back towards the steering wheel, that's the full beam on. You know the full beam's on because there is a blue light that's illuminated on the dashboard. To extinguish the headlight, just make the same action, pull that back towards the steering wheel, and the full beam is now off. You might be asked to show how you would check that your indicators were working correctly. You do that by simply pressing the hazard switch. You'd have to get out of the car because it's a show me question, walk around the car and just make sure all your indicators are working correctly. When you get back into the car, make sure you switch it back off again. You might be asked to show your driving examiner how you would clean the windscreen using the windscreen washer and wipers. Switch the ignition on first, press the end of this lever in and hold it in. That squirts water onto the screen, release the button, the window's wiped automatically, it will switch off, there'll be a pause for a few seconds where it'll wipe again and then it'll just automatically switch itself off.